They laughed, when the bride arrived with no shoes, until the mountain man carried her inside. Colorado Territory, a wind-battered town in the Rocky Mountains. Autumn, 1872. Dust swirled around the wooden chapel like a ghost refusing to settle. The old building groaned under the sharp breath of the mountain wind. Its steeple bent slightly eastward, as if it too did not care much for the ceremony about to unfold within. The buckboard wagon creaked to a halt, its wheels caked in red clay. From it stepped a girl who did not belong to that stage, not in the way she was dressed. Her name was Mary May, and her wedding dress had once been ivory but now clung to her legs in dull creases and dirt. There were no pearls at her throat, no veil, no satin gloves, and no shoes. Her bare feet touched the earth like she was greeting it, like she belonged more to the land than to the altar she was being dragged toward. Mud streaked her ankles, a thorn clung to her hem. From the crowd gathered outside the church, the whispers began like crackling brush fire. Did she forget her boots? No, she ain't got any. Look at her. Barefoot. On her weddin' day. Poor thing's too broke to marry decent. Or too wild. Her mother, rigid and pale in her Sunday dress, gripped Mary's arm tighter. Keep walking, she hissed through clenched teeth. You'll shame this family no more than you already have. Her father stood a few steps behind, chewing the inside of his cheek, eyes trained on a point, far away from his daughter's shame. Mary didn't speak. Her face was calm, too calm, but inside her chest, something kicked against its cage. Ahead, the church doors hung open, and in the threshold stood Harlan Dodd, a man in his late 40s with a gut built from cattle money and whiskey, wearing a brown coat 2 sizes too fine for his posture. His mustache curled like it was smirking, even when the rest of his face did not. He didn't smile when he saw Mary. He looked at her feet first, then her face. Then he turned to the preacher with a small shake of the head, as if apologizing for the quality of his purchase. Mary paused at the bottom step. The wind tugged her skirt. Keep going, her mother snapped again, under her breath. We did not come all this way for you to turn into a joke now. Mary looked at the church, looked at the man inside it, looked at her own hands. Then she stepped forward, one bare foot onto the wooden step, then another. The boards were cold beneath her skin. As she reached the threshold, the crowd shifted, murmured, some chuckled under their breath. And then came the first laugh, sharp, dry, cruel. It broke the spell. A second laugh joined. Then another, like coyotes circling a limping deer. Mary's chest rose, her cheeks burned, her fingers twitched at her sides. And just as she crossed the threshold, just as the preacher opened his mouth and Harlan reached lazily for her hand, the church doors slammed open behind her, with a force that sent a ripple through the room. Wind screamed through the opening, extinguishing a few candles. Hats blew sideways. Skirts rustled. And there, in the doorway, stood Boone Calder, 6 feet and some inches of unshaven mountain silence, wrapped in a dark fur coat that bore the scent of pine and ash. His boots were covered in frost. His eyes, ice blue and still as lake water in winter, swept the room once, landing on Mary. The laughter died like a shot wool. No one moved. Boone didn't blink. He took a step forward into the church, and with it came a hush so thick you could slice it with a knife. Someone whispered from the back, barely audible, "Is that Boone Calder?" Mary turned slowly to face him. She did not smile, but something in her shoulders, until that moment tight as rope, eased, just slightly. Boone stared at her, and only her. And the mountain wind shut the door gently behind him. Boone Calder took one step into the chapel, then another. His boots thudded against the old wood like the beat of a war drum, slow, steady, final. The air around him carried the sharp scent of pine, fir, and the kind of cold that clung to a man who had not stood among crowds in many years. His eyes never left Mary May. Not for a moment. The preacher, fingers trembling around his Bible, cleared his throat. "Sir," he stammered, "are you here to witness the union?" Boone didn't speak. From the front of the room, Harlan Dodd stepped forward, his face blotched red with disbelief. "This is my wedding," he growled. "I don't know who you think you are, but you best turn around and walk back out the way you came." Still no answer. Boone's silence was louder than any man's threats. Mary stood motionless between them, eyes wide, and then, just for an instant, a flicker of memory rose behind her gaze. Snow falling, a crackling fire, the same cold eyes, softer then, peering at her across a blanket. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. Boone took one more step forward, then another. The crowd parted instinctively. No one dared stand in his path. When he reached Mary, he didn't ask. He didn't speak. He bent down and lifted her off the ground. Gasps broke from every corner of the chapel. Her veil fluttered as his arms wrapped beneath her knees and shoulders. She was weightless in his grip, stunned, her hands pressed to his chest. "Boone," she breathed, "don't do this." His voice came quiet but strong. "You are not something to be handed over to scavengers." Harlan surged forward, pushing past a row of onlookers. His hand went straight for the revolver on his hip. "You son of a—" Boone turned toward him. No sudden movement, just a slow, deliberate shift. But his eyes, those pale, frozen eyes, locked onto Harlan's and held him there. Harlan's fingers froze above the gun. Boone didn't need a weapon. He was the weapon. The tension in the room twisted tighter than a drawn bowstring. And then, a whisper, barely audible, from the back pew. "Boone Calder," an old woman said, voice thin with awe. "That's him. Lives alone in the high ridge. Hasn't come down in 10 years. Someone else murmured, "They say he killed a bear once. Bare hands. Never said a word about it." The crowd, once smug and judgmental, now stood still as fence posts, eyes darting from Boone to Mary, to the useless preacher. Mary looked up at Boone. She should have felt fear, but she didn't, only warmth, and a strange, aching calm. Boone turned away from the altar.